obvious statement time. Learning the guitar is not easy. And there really are a lifetime of things that you can practice and study. So why not get some leverage over things and knock over that lead domino that makes everything after it fall into place a little bit easier. Now, I personally avoided learning anything related to music theory early on in my guitar journey, and that made things unknowingly difficult for me. But fortunately, and quite by accident, I stumbled onto the best music lesson that I ever got, and I think this can help you too. And that's what this video is all about. By the time I'd been playing guitar around 6 or 7 years or so, I could play a lot of tunes by then, but none of it really made any sense to me. I just kept charging through tab books and I memorized as much material as I could. Learning songs was really slow and arduous process, and songwriting was just complete guesswork. Now, my friend William went to an audio engineering school after high school, and he was bumping into real musicians all the time, and someone gave him a chord pattern, a sequence that really put us on the path to understanding things on a much deeper level.
Hey man, it's William. I'm out here at the conservatory, and this guy just gave me a great piece of information I thought I'd share. There's a pattern to help you figure out which chords are in a key and whether they're major or minor. It goes like this: major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished.
That little nugget is worth so much to me. It simplified the chords that fit together in a major key. It gave me a framework, and it was small enough of a sequence I could actually remember it and use it. We're going to walk through an application and show you how it works in the key of C, but this was so much more than that for me. It put me on the path to understanding a lot more about music. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. I'll show you that in a minute, but first let's walk through the pattern. Let's take a look at the key of C. We're going to start with a C major chord. Why major? Because that's the first in the pattern. And our next chord in the pattern is going to be minor. And if we walk up the alphabet from C, D comes next, so we know we've got to have a D minor in the key of C as our next chord. And then from there, we keep going up the alphabet. E, and it should be minor based on the sequence. And then F, and it should be major based on the sequence. G should be major. A should be minor, and then we've got the oddball, the diminished chord, B diminished for the 7th chord in the sequence. Now, a couple of cool things. This pattern applies if you change the chord. So if we change the key from C, you'll just change your root notes of all the chords, but the first chord will be major, second will be minor, third will be minor, and so on following that sequence. And the pattern also works with minor chords. Let's take a look at A minor, for example. We'll just start this sequence with the 6th item in that list. So if A minor is our key, then we move to the next chord, which needs to be diminished. For B diminished, the next needs to be major, C major, then minor. So there's our D minor, then minor again, E minor, then major for F, and then we need G major, and we're back around at our first chord, A minor. Now, the chords in the key of A minor are actually the same as the chords in the key of C major because of the relationship between those two keys. But I wanted you to see how that sequence just shifts and starts on the 6th chord for a minor key. That was awesome, and it helped me to learn all the 4-chord strummers that I could stand. That pattern is so very useful. But as I mentioned, this is bigger to me than just the chord sequences. The reason is when I dug into why that pattern works, things really started to click for me. Let's do a little exercise here. All right, let's write out the musical alphabet starting with C, essentially the C major scale. C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And now let's stack another row of notes on top of that, but let's begin with the next letter of the scale. And let's repeat this, stacking the notes on top of the previous row, and we end up with a grid of letters. And this grid was kind of my Rosetta Stone. Now let's highlight the bottom row, the 3rd row from the bottom, and the 5th row from the bottom. And these, if you look up the columns, are going to be the notes that make up the basic 3-note chord or triad. And each chord is built from the same scale, the C major scale. We didn't introduce any notes outside of that, so the chords that we can pull from this grid are said to be diatonic. And you'll see that the first chord that we get is a C major with the notes C, E, and G. Now, as you move across the columns, each 3-note group forms a chord, and it gets its name from the root note, that bottom layer, and then we have to determine whether it's major or minor, and that's all about this middle row here. If the middle row note is 3 half steps above the root, then we've got a minor chord, and if it's 4 half steps above the root, then we've got a major chord. And if none of that makes sense to you, then grab your guitar, play the 2 notes, and listen. Listen for a sort of happy, complete, home sort of sound. That's going to be major, or a sound that's a little bit somber and sad, and that's going to be your minor interval. Then there's that oddball out here, the 7th chord in the sequence, the diminished chord. It sounds completely wrecked, and that's because not only do we have a minor third, that middle note being only 3 half steps away from the root, but the 5th is only 6 half steps away from the root, whereas the rest are 7. It's different, it's diminished, just know that. So not only does this grid support major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished, and that chord sequence, it also tells you the notes that are actually in the chord. But this thing really keeps going. If you add another layer of notes to the 3-note triads, then you can build 7th chords that belong to a key. If you come back around and add the rows that we've missed, the 2nd, 4th, and 6th, you can add some really cool jazzy extensions. These are the notes that you will need for 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths. So far, we've looked at this as a bit of a chord generator, and it's great for that. But what if we look at the bass layer as the C major scale? That's what it is. This is actually one of the modes of C major called the Ionian mode. And if we move up the rows, we have the names of the other, or we have the notes of the other 6 modes. We've got Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, Mixolydian, Aeolian, and Locrian. And this might be a super nerdy way to look at things, but it really helped me. And even if you don't want to write out the scales, harmonize it with different layers, and then work on modes, you should still memorize the major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished chord sequence. It'll get you far. It will really help you learn songs a whole lot faster. Now, this is one of, if not the music lesson that had the biggest impact on me as a guitarist. It helped me understand things, and I hope that it helps you. It was kind of my light bulb moment. But let me hear from you. What light bulb moments have you had on the guitar? Now, I'll put together a diatonic worksheet that you can download and work your way through harmonizing a scale and actually see how chords are constructed. You can pick that up right here or at the link in the description. And I hope you got something out of this lesson. If so, hit the like button and consider subscribing, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, practice smart and play on.